Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, July the 8th, 2024. People are talking about Kamala Harris, at least progressives are talking about her, and they're really suggesting that she should perhaps replace Biden, at least as the Democrat nominee for the November election. And I've looked at Kamala Harris's chart before, and I've always suggested that one should not underestimate Kamala Harris. She has got a strong chart, and if she uses her chart in the right way, I think that she could be particularly strong. I think she has this lesson to learn, that she has to be less of a Libra and more of an Aries, because Kamala Harris was born exactly on the full moon, with sun in Libra, moon in Aries. And as I always say, that in a female chart, the moon is probably more important than the sun, and women should grow into their moon and move away from their sun. And I think that this is something that Kamala Harris really needs to do if she wants to have any chance of getting the top job. I also wanted to consider in this video, aside from Kamala Harris, I wanted to have another look at some of the charts relating to Joe Biden, in particular his inauguration chart on January the 20th, 2021, when he became president, and also his last solar return, because I think we're starting to see the potential of these charts really start to manifest now. So that's what I'm going to be looking at in this video. But first of all, I wanted to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, July the 8th, 2024. And by the way, if you do enjoy this video, I would be really grateful and if you were to subscribe, assuming you're not subscribed. And even if you are subscribed, I would really appreciate it if you were to like this video. So let's look at what's going on today, Monday. I'm not actually convinced that it's a particularly action-packed day. I mean, there are a couple of aspects of note. For example, we have got, what have we got? We've got Venus is sextile Uranus. There's Venus, 26 Cancer, sextile Uranus at 26 Taurus. So Venus sextile Uranus, it's a nice aspect. It's an exciting aspect. Okay, it's not in particularly exciting signs, Cancer to Taurus. So there's a certain amount of stability and staidness with Cancer and Taurus. So that sort of slows down the usual excitement we get with Venus and Uranus. But there may be a sense that things happen that we hadn't planned for. Those things might relate to relationships. They could also relate to money. Venus is a money-orientated planet, so there may be opportunities to make a gain that we hadn't actually planned for. And also we've got Mercury sextile Jupiter. So there is Mercury in Leo, making a sextile to Jupiter in Gemini. This aspect has been forming over the weekend. I think that it's an aspect that allows us to communicate in a very smooth way, and we can get our message across. And I think it also helps relationships. I mean, I've said that Venus sextile Uranus could help relationships in providing perhaps a little bit of excitement, creating the possibility of an unexpected event, an unexpected meeting. Mercury aspecting Jupiter, likewise. Okay, we don't have a relationship planet involved there, but communication is always important. And so I think that Mercury sextile Jupiter allows us to create new connections. And at the same time, Mercury is the mind. It's about our ideas. It's about having good ideas. It's about having fortunate ideas. And it's also about the ability to communicate in a way that is effective, and perhaps we can make other people enthusiastic and optimistic, not just about our ideas, but maybe their ideas as well. If you want to cheer people up, Mercury sextile Jupiter, is great. Then we have we do have a midpoint aspect, which I think needs to be mentioned, and the fact that Saturn is square the Sun-Mars midpoint. So there's the Sun and Mars, and the square to aspect, well, the Sun-Mars midpoint is around 19 Gemini. And so with Saturn square the Sun-Mars square the Sun-Mars midpoint, that can be a little bit difficult. Sun-Mars can represent accidents, things happening that are not necessarily fortunate. Sun-Mars as a pair, these two very masculine planets, very positive planets, and you put them together and you can get something almost explosive happening. And then Saturn comes along. So Saturn may represent a certain sense of frustration, but could explode. Or it may just be a frustration with what is happening. So we try to do something, it doesn't work, and we get frustrated. So we need to take it easily with that Saturn square the Sun-Mars midpoint. We mustn't be in a hurry. Because, if we are in a hurry, if we don't pay attention to the details, something could happen that may be unfortunate. It could even be dangerous. It's certainly not a day for, playing with dangerous chemicals, for example, or certainly playing with fireworks. Yeah, fireworks is always a problem, isn't it? Of course, July the 4th is over. Apparently there are 9 or 10 deaths per year on average in the United States from fireworks, which is kind of lower than expected, but maybe every death from fireworks is kind of unfortunate. This city I'm in, Lakewood, they refuse to ban fireworks. They restrict fireworks, but I think the problem is that all the cities around Lakewood, this city, have got severe restrictions on fireworks on the 4th of July. So that means that the knuckleheads gravitate towards Lakewood. I like the word knucklehead. The mayor of Lakewood uses this term a lot, knuckleheads. For people he doesn't approve of, people acting in a crazy way, but he doesn't understand that he himself is creating knuckleheads through some of his policies. But anyway, sorry, I'm going in a tangent there. So as far as the heliocentric position is concerned, let's see what's going on. So here is the position of the planets with the Sun in the center of the solar system, and there is the Earth-Mars square. So that Earth-Mars square is now really breaking up now. The Earth is 2 degrees away from that Earth and Mars, but it's still there. I know I say this every day, but just a reminder: the Earth is still square Mars. This is a time when there are annoyances, possibly not helped by the fact that Mars is still semi-sextile Saturn. Again, the Mars semi-sextile Saturn aspect, the one sign apart using the heliocentric coordinate system. So with the Mars and Saturn one sign apart, there can be a little bit of frustration, but this is frustration that has perhaps been building up over the last few days, and perhaps it's past peak, and likewise with Earth square Mars. So it's something that it maybe was worse yesterday or the day before. So I don't want to sort of overemphasize that too much. And I think that's about it. Oh, I should point out that Mercury is opposition Chiron, and I would have said that Chiron, Mercury-Chiron opposition is now at sort of peak strength, as strong as it gets. Now, Mercury does move fast. I think from a heliocentric view, moves around the sun once every 88 days. So Mercury opposition Chiron from a heliocentric view is not exactly unusual, but still it's happening today. And with Mercury opposition Chiron, as I think I said in a previous video, it can be about the maverick in us, about we want to say something that gets attention. We want to show that we're different, that we see the world in a different way, that we can be a little bit of a rebel. So that may be how Mercury opposition Chiron works. And if it's not us being a maverick in terms of what we're saying, what we're trying to communicate, it may be someone else. So perhaps someone is trying to get attention with Mercury opposition Chiron. Though I suppose we shouldn't forget the sort of wounded healer aspect of Chiron. And some of us may find that our concentration is disturbed by other people's pain, other people's suffering. You know, it's just easy to be in one's own world and just to be focused on oneself. But what one doesn't want is something nagging away, disturbing our peace of mind. You know, that concept of when you talk about healing and doing the right thing for the world, there's always that distinction, isn't there, between, how does it go? Comforting the disturbed and disturbing the comfortable. And so there's a bit of comforting the disturbed and disturbing the comfortable here. With Mercury opposition Chiron, perhaps the challenge is to comfort the disturbed. And if we just walk by and think something doesn't bother us, whether it's in our community, whether it's in the world, then that's maybe a question of Mercury opposition Chiron disturbing the comfortable. We'd like everything to be fine. We'd just like to live in our own little bubble, but something's bothering us. Our comfort is being disturbed. And that could be Mercury opposition Chiron. Okay, I'm now going to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, July the 8th, 2024. Aries, overall, you're feeling good. You're feeling that things are actually starting to move your way, that you're able to really express yourself a lot more than usual. And I think that you may have a sense of the power of the spoken word. And you say something and you can be fairly sure that you're going to get some kind of reaction. And you're perhaps facilitated by the fact that the moon moving through Leo is making a trine to Chiron. And okay, this trine to Chiron is more about the end of the day, perhaps stronger if you're in the United States, but I think that it probably impacts everyone. The reason is because there's no clutter. When I say there's no clutter, the moon doesn't actually make many aspects where it is. The moon does make a square to Mars. I'll be talking about that in a moment. But it also makes this trine to Chiron. So moon square Mars, moon trine Chiron. right now, those are the moon's main aspects. And I think regardless of where you are on Earth, I think you're going to feel both of them. And with that moon trine Chiron, it's about just feeling that you can say something that is certainly going to get an impact. And I think you're going to want to make an impact. And furthermore, I think it's appropriate. Sometimes one says something and one just causes chaos and upset just for the sake of it. It's amusing, and then one walks away. And that's not the right thing to do. I think at the moment it is the right thing to do. Because, it is a time when a North Node is in Aries. North Node is the way forward. And Chiron is also in Aries. So with Moon trine Chiron, perhaps people are just too set in their ways. Perhaps they are too comfortable. And with Moon trine Chiron, you're certainly able to stir things up. And just before Moon trines Chiron, it makes a square to Mars. And that is one of the most important aspects of the day, Moon square Mars. And Moon square Mars is quite an angry aspect. And I think there are things that could make you angry. Perhaps a bit frustrated, but I don't really want to go on and on about frustration. I think overall it is a good day, but I think that you might feel that there are things you would like to do that are important to you, but you might feel that there is a financial restriction or perhaps a material restriction. Things aren't just moving fast enough. Things are a bit stuck. And that has a lot to do with the fact that Mars is in Taurus. Mars is your ruler. It's in Taurus. Taurus can be quite a slow sign. And so with Moon square Mars, that does indicate a bit of frustration. But you have to recognize that if something is worth doing, and if something is like a key part of who you are, then financial and material concerns are irrelevant. I mean, it's as they say, the best things in life are free. If something has to be paid for, then maybe it's not necessary. Because you are given every day you are given everything you need in terms of whatever your destiny is. If it is your destiny to do something on a particular day, you have everything you need. You don't need to buy in. You don't need to spend money. So don't allow yourself to feel frustrated because of an apparent material blockage or you feel, I'd like to do this. It's such an important part of my creativity, but I haven't got the money. Well, obviously, if you need to buy it, it's not an important part of your creativity. So do consider that. And, as an Aries, you should be transcending financial concerns, especially now. The moon is in Leo, Mercury is in Leo. Leo is a creative, fun-loving sign, so there are no excuses. You can do your own thing. You can have fun. You can be creative. You can enjoy yourself, and also you can make the world a better place because of that trine between the moon and Chiron. And you may be further pushed by a sense of constructive anger. Now, when I talked about that moon square Mars, I was suggesting that might be to do with you feeling frustrated, but it might also be about anger, about the way the world is treating someone or is treating itself. So there could be a certain sense of righteous anger. And I don't mean that in a bad sense, righteous anger. Sometimes it's okay to be righteous and to tell people, what is true and what is not. Taurus. Right now, Taurus, you probably feel that there's not a lot you can do, that the whole thing is maybe set in stone. And, what happens today, it's already decided, and you probably can just bide your time. That's fine, Taurus, but you do have to be a little careful and also a little imaginative. In fact, maybe you have to be quite a lot imaginative. So there is a danger that you allow other people to set the pace for you. And I'm thinking particularly of your family and all the stuff that's going on at home. It could be a major pull on your attention. But if you are under too much pressure, especially from family members, people who know you very well, then Taurus, you could find yourself not just feeling frustrated, but actually feeling pretty angry. There are things you want to do, and you don't really appreciate it when other people restrict your freedom of action. Though, to be honest, if anyone is restricting your freedom of action, particularly members of your family, then I think it is a case of you allowing them to restrict your action. And if you are spending time at home, time with people you know very well, I do think, Taurus, you do have to be careful, because when you're in one place for too long, the pressure levels start to rise. You get stuck, you don't move, frustration starts to set in, anger starts to set in, and before you know it, you're really starting to feel really quite annoyed. And what you need is to be given an alternative. And that's where an aspect between Venus and Uranus comes in. Venus is your ruler, and it is sextile Uranus. So with Venus sextile Uranus, that's it. That's about your need for variety and change, and perhaps for mental stimulation. And you can find it, but not if you just stay in one place. You need a little bit of movement. Not a lot of movement, just a bit of movement. Just moving from one place to another, not staying in any one scene for longer than you have to. And that's especially the case if you're with people who know you very well. I suppose there's always a problem that familiarity breeds contempt. It may be other people not having respect for you and your time. Maybe you just finding that certain people, you know them so well, they're just becoming tedious and you want to fight back against them. So having a little bit of variety, Taurus, is going to be really very important. And I think that Venus sextile Uranus encourages you, just go somewhere different. You don't have to go for on a huge journey, just a small detour, perhaps visiting a place or a group of people who you haven't perhaps seen for a few weeks, just to give yourself some variety. And I think that's going to make really such a big difference. But you don't have to go and do something crazy. You don't have to travel hundreds of miles. The variety you need is very close. And once you get that variety, I think that you're going to be feeling a whole lot better. At the same time, I think it's a day when you can discuss important subjects which might be about money, might be about what needs to be done, projects, not necessarily exciting projects, but just things that need to be fixed, sorted out. Perhaps money has to be spent, but obviously you want to keep expenditure down to a minimum. If you want to talk about that kind of stuff, a very focused conversation about specific subjects, perhaps they could be business related, they could be related to, I don't know, something that needs to be paid for around your own home, or just something that needs to be worked out. I think that you're going to be able to do a really good job on it, and I think the discussions will be very fruitful. But again, we're not talking about anything exciting. It's just about getting things sorted out with a minimum of fuss. So that's Monday, Taurus. I'm not saying it's wildly exciting, but I think that with Venus sextile Uranus, it's exciting enough. Gemini. The main aspect today, from a Gemini perspective, is a sextile between Mercury and Jupiter. And as far as I'm concerned, this aspect is really very fortunate. It can be a good day. I mean, Jupiter is in your sign. Jupiter's in Gemini. Jupiter is a planet of good luck. Mercury is in Leo. It's a sign which, from a Gemini perspective, is very communicative. You're able to say what's on your mind, and then you put Mercury and Jupiter together in a sextile, and you can really say it as it is, and the things you say should attract favorable attention. And if you don't want to say anything, then your ideas could be very powerful. You think about something, you think about some possibility. Geminis are always thinking, and you get an idea, and it's just great. And so, in that sense, I think it should be a really good day. So make the most of it. It's not a day when you should be doing nothing, just lazing around watching your clouds go by. In fact, there aren't any clouds around when I'm looking at the sky. It's completely cloud-free. But if there are clouds, don't spend too much time watching them, because you have got other things to do, things going on. And ideally, Gemini, you will make some effort to interact with other people. I mean, Mercury is your ruler of Gemini. Jupiter is ruler of Sagittarius, your opposite sign. So Mercury sextile Jupiter can be about getting on very well with other people. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to be 100% easy, because this is a sextile. A sextile is an aspect which, although it's fortunate, has a certain amount of tension to it. That's because a sextile is 1/6 of a circle. 6 is 2 times 3. 2 is conflict. 3 is ease, the dynamic tension. It's kind of there, but not in a way that's really going to upset us. And so make a little bit of an effort to get on with people. Don't expect it to be completely easy. Just a bit of preparation, a bit of research perhaps, if you're meeting someone for the first time. But it all comes together. And so I think, Gemini, your various relationships should prosper. You and other people will certainly have things to talk about. And, if there have been recent misunderstandings, now would be a perfect time to really start to sort them out and, be able to find the similarities between you and another person, and not to focus on the differences. Though perhaps what we're dealing with here is a bit of complementarity. What's the word? Two things being complementary. You and someone else, yeah, you have your differences, but these are differences which complement each other, which do not clash. So really, Gemini, take advantage of the situation, and see what's available in a social sense. And even if there's no one around, you can't find anyone to communicate with, still Mercury represents your brain, and your brain with Mercury sextile Jupiter is on great form, and you can come up with some amazing ideas, and I think you're going to have a chance to put theory into practice. Cancer. There could be a sense in which you feel that you have to focus on money and material stuff. That is possible. And yeah, that's because the moon is in Leo. You may be relatively aware of, for example, what things cost, and how much money you've got, what you don't have, what you can afford. That is going to be of concern to you. And in certain situations, it might be an annoyance. And that would especially be the case if you are with other people, having to socialize, for example, and where money comes up. And that's because the moon is making a square to Mars. And that square between moon and Mars could make you annoyed and angry, especially as there aren't actually that many aspects today, direct aspects, major aspects between the planets and the moon. There aren't that many going on. So with moon square Mars, that planet is somewhat emphasized. It makes itself felt because there's not much noise from other aspects. So moon square Mars could make itself felt in terms of you getting annoyed about the attitude of other people, perhaps your friends, perhaps people you've got on fairly well with in the past, but this time round it's really quite irritating. And yes, it's absolutely possible that money is part of that irritation, but it's true that you have to stand up for your rights, and if people have irresponsible attitudes to money, you do have to correct them. But at the same time, you have to also recognize that money could be the source of a lot of bad feeling. And so perhaps, if at all possible, you should de-emphasize money, unless it's really important. Because, once you start talking about money, once you start engaging with money, it may be difficult to stop. And yeah, you might just find yourself getting annoyed, and it's not desirable, and it's possibly avoidable. The moon is also making a trine to Chiron, and perhaps you should be thinking about the moon's trine to Chiron rather than its square to Mars. And I think that this moon trine Chiron is going to highlight the part of you which is quite unique. Cancerians always have a unique view of the world, which they have carefully not just thought out, but it relates to their feelings and their emotional responses. And that's something that you are going to want to express. I don't think, for example, you're really going to want to follow the crowd. You have your own way of doing things, and this just reminds us that Chiron can be the maverick. Chiron is in Aries, and even if you're doing something very serious and very responsible, you still want to do it your way, and you don't really want to be told, and especially with Moon trine Chiron. And we shouldn't forget that Chiron can be about wounds and people who've got some kind of a problem. And I think Cancer, you're going to be especially sensitive to other people's wounds. And if anyone has got a wound or is hurting in any way, I think you'll pick up on it immediately. And maybe you'll be able to do something about it. Okay, that's especially the case if you're in a high-profile situation. If you're, for example, you're going into work today, or you're going into some kind of organizational building, you'll just see that someone is hurting, and perhaps you can do something about it. So, try to be imaginative there, and also do trust your feelings. But again, you don't have to follow the crowd. It is a time for being an individual. And I think that if you can be an individual, even if you have a position of high responsibility, you will really stand out. And I think in the end, you will be appreciated. Leo, you are fairly dynamic today, Leo. And the reason is that there is a square between the Moon and Mars. And I think that for you, this square between the Moon and Mars is actually quite a good thing. Okay, we talk about moon squares between Moon and Mars, and we talk about anger, and we talk about aggravation and arguments, and one might think that that's a bit of a negative. But this Moon-Mars square is, I think, something that you can actually harness. The Moon is in Leo. It's in your sign. This is a time when, Leo, you are, I think, pretty focused on yourself and what you can achieve. And I think that you have very clear ambitions about what is actually possible. And with that square to Mars, that gives you the impetus to really make things happen. And people can't ignore you. You have a clear set of aims. You want to achieve it today. Or you want to achieve these aims today. And, I'm confident that you can do it. But it may be a situation where you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. If you want something to happen, you may find that you have to tread on people's toes. You might upset people. They might get annoyed with you. There might be arguments. There might be anger. And that sounds negative, but I don't think it is negative. I actually think it's good in this situation, provided you are very focused, provided you are really focusing on something that's important, that it's worth having an argument about. Some things are worth arguing about. And overall, I really do think, Leo, that you are in a strong position. And at the same time, you can bring to bear a considerable amount of power and force. if need be. And that's a Leo thing. I mean, Leo is fixed fire. Fire can be a bit vague. This flame, it moves from one place to another, but is it really focused? But Leo's fixed fire. And I suppose you could say that fixed fire is a laser beam, taking heat, taking energy, just focusing it on one thing. And that's what Leo can do. And once you've decided that something is important, then really, I don't think that you can be stopped. So in that sense, I think it could be a very successful day, but it's possibly not going to be a harmonious day. Harmony is not always a good thing. Harmony can be about complacency. Everything is fine. We'll do things the same old way. Why do today what we can put off until tomorrow? That kind of complacency. But it's not a complacent day. It's a high energy day. And yeah, it's true that some people might not appreciate your approach. Some people might get angry with you, but does that matter? I think today you just have to do what is right for yourself and not worry too much about whether other people like or dislike what you're doing. Virgo. We always have to look at Mercury when we're considering what's happening to Virgos. And Mercury, in a way, is quite well placed because Mercury is sextile Jupiter. And with Mercury sextile Jupiter, you're quite fortunate. I mean, that's easy because Jupiter is the planet of good fortune. Mercury is sextile Jupiter. I mean, you've got to be fortunate at some level. Things are going your way and you can make things happen. But the question is, how do you make things happen? At the moment, Virgo, you shouldn't feel that you need to get a lot of attention. Even though I think, Virgo, you actually want a lot of attention. You want people to take note of what you're doing. You want praise. I mean, if you get praise and you get attention, oh, that'd be great. But what if you don't? It really shouldn't matter. And I think doing things in your own way, at your own pace, not in the spotlight, is fine. And in most cases, it's probably the best way of doing it. And you shouldn't worry too much about external feedback because you are doing the right thing. And I think that with this Mercury sextile Jupiter, you can really be creating a favorable situation for yourself that just may not be immediately apparent. It's almost like an investment for the future. You're putting in the work now, you're making the connections, you're having the ideas, and later you will be able to reap the benefits. So that means, for example, if you are concerned about getting ahead, about, for example, business or work or something like that, lots you can do, but what you're doing may not be noticed. And I suppose Virgos are quite used to that. Virgos can sometimes do things behind the scenes. It can be a very service-orientated sign, working in the background, not getting the attention. Okay, that's the situation short term, but it's only a short-term situation. I think, Virgo, you can do some very valuable preparations, and also preparations in a social sense. I think that you are doing things right now that sooner or later are going to make you popular and are going to make you new friends and new contacts. And we shouldn't forget also that Jupiter is ruler of Pisces, and Pisces is your opposite sign. So with Mercury sextile Jupiter, relationships can work in your favor. So if you are already in a relationship, then I think Mercury sextile Jupiter should allow relationships to develop further, and you and the important people in your life can have a favorable impact on each other and find new ways of relating. And if you are looking for relationships, then someone is, I think, available, and you might not feel that you're able to make an impact, you're able to get their attention, but I think you are getting people's attention. You might feel that you're being ignored, that no one notices you, but I think that impression would be wrong, and that there's no need to make a big fuss about it. And in fact, it's just important that you don't make a big fuss about it. Just be yourself. You are being noticed, and whatever you're doing, you are making yourself more popular, and also I think people like you, and so there's no need to make a big attempt to get attention. It's quite unnecessary. So it might not seem to be a good day to start with, because things might be a little bit low profile, but in fact it can be a really good day, and it's all to do with that Mercury sextile Jupiter. You can be happy and successful on your own terms, and you don't have to move outside your comfort zone. Quite unnecessary. So that should suit you very well. Libra. Now, Libra, you need to bear in mind that this week Venus moves out of Cancer into Leo. Now, it doesn't happen today. That's something that does happen later in the week. But I think it's something you need to be aware of, because right now Venus, your ruler, is in Cancer, and Cancer is quite a high-profile sector in your chart, and it can be connected with success and achievement. So if there's anything that you're trying to do, and particularly in terms of achievement, and you're trying to sort out particular goals, then there may be a little bit of a hurry. You haven't got all the time in the world. You should be really thinking now about what you're trying to achieve, and over the next few days you should get going on it. Don't be complacent. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. So make the most of Venus's movement through Cancer before it moves into Leo. Now, Venus moving into Leo is fine. There are many advantages of Venus moving into Leo, but you want to take what's available right now. Don't think too much about the future, because I think opportunities are there, and it would be a shame to miss the chance. On a different note, there is already a lot of activity in Leo. The moon is in Leo, Mercury is in Leo. I think that you are very aware of what's going on around you in a social sense. Libra is a sociable sign. People do matter to you. You're acutely aware of the delicate balance between you and other people, between different people. There's always a sense of a bit of a power struggle. I mean, Librans are aware of that. The social dynamics do really matter to you. And so you could be spending a lot of time sort of negotiating your social environment, and working out who who needs to be with who, and perhaps you can bring people together. But there could be some friction because the moon is making a square to Mars, and there is not a 100% harmonious situation here. Some people are just annoyed about something, and you might try your hardest to please them, to make them happy, but I'm not convinced that you're going to be successful. So if you feel that someone is just annoyed, is perhaps cantankerous, has got a chip on their shoulder, consider the possibility that there's really nothing that can be done. And in order to reduce the possibility of this kind of situation where you're dealing with angry people, then it might be a good idea not to spend too long with any one particular person. If you spend a long time with someone, you start to get an understanding of who they are, and then they start to get an understanding of who you are, and they start to respond to the situation in actually not a very fortunate way. They just might start to reveal their rough edges, and before you know it, the situation becomes unpleasant. So I would suggest that you do try to move from place to place. Now that can be difficult because the moon and Mercury are in Leo. Leo is a fixed sign, and so with this emphasis on Leo, it's tempting to get stuck in one place, to be with the same people for a long period of time, but that might be asking for trouble. And really, Libra, what you need is variety, and I think you can find variety because Venus is making a sextile to Uranus. So Venus sextile Uranus is about perhaps some kind of surprise, something happening that you weren't expecting, but it's a surprise that is fortunate. And if you want surprises, and if you want good things to happen, that is actually another reason to keep moving. Because if you stay in one place, then you're restricting the possibilities. It's like if you want to find, if you want to find a $10 bill or a $100 bill on the road, and you stay in one place, you're not going to find it, are you? You've got to keep moving. Okay, it's still pretty unlikely. People don't often drop $10 or $100 bills on the street, but if you want variety, movement is really important. And if you want an exciting thing to happen, then movement is important, because you've got to create as many chances as possible. That's what it's all about, creating chances for yourself. And by having an active day, then you're increasing your chances of something out of the blue happening to you. So really do consider that. And at the same time, Libra, do consider the impact you are having on other people, especially in the light of the fact that Moon is making a trine to Chiron. And that trine between Moon and Chiron perhaps gives you an opportunity to help someone. Chiron has relevance to healing, or it can do. Chiron is in your opposite sign of Aries. Moon making a trine to Chiron just gives you a chance to engage with someone and realize that they've got a problem, and also realize that you perhaps have the solution. Okay, it depends on the problem. I'm not talking about some super serious problem. It's the kind of problem that can be dealt with in a fairly straightforward way without needing huge amounts of expertise. But I think that Libra, you can really have a fortunate impact. So do consider that possibility. And the last thing you want to do is see that someone's got an issue, someone's got a problem, and just walk away. That's not what you want to do. And that is actually another reason why you need to keep moving today, because if you keep moving, you meet more people, there are more situations, and there are more opportunities to make the world a better place, surely. Scorpio. I think, Scorpio, there are going to be some things today that could make you somewhat annoyed, and that is because there is a square between the Moon and Mars. That square between Moon and Mars can't really be avoided. We've got Mars is in Taurus, Moon is in Leo, and that the Moon-Mars square is arguably the most important aspect happening today. There's not a great deal else happening. And so with Moon square Mars, you are, I think, going to be challenged. And that could make you annoyed. You want things done in a particular way, and then someone comes along and challenges you. But maybe this annoyance and this challenge are actually quite constructive. There's perhaps a possibility, Scorpio, that you start the day not really knowing what to do, not knowing how to do it, and maybe feeling that your own power is somewhat limited, that there's not really much you can achieve. So that's how you start the day, but you seem to be happy in this particular world. I'm not saying happy, but you certainly don't have the motivation to move out of it. And then you are challenged. Someone challenges you. Events challenge you. You're being told that maybe you're not being proactive enough. Maybe you actually need to go and do something. And that might not be to your liking. You might complain about it. You're just there doing your own thing, and someone wants you to do something else, and you could resist this pressure. But Scorpio, I don't think you should resist this pressure. Your first emotional reaction to a situation is not necessarily the right reaction. You should hold back in terms of showing your irritation. You should consider how you are being challenged to tune into the kind of person who you should be. So try to see other people as a plus, as being a dynamic force that can help you to live out your day's destiny. I know when we talk about destiny, we sometimes think about years and decades, lifetimes. This is my life destiny. But really, each day has its destiny. And one's destiny for one day can be different than for another day. So, make sure that you tune into your destiny for today. And at the same time, do give people an opportunity to be different. Venus is sextile Uranus. Venus represents the other person, whoever that other person might be. So Venus sextile Uranus is that other person wanting to be an individual, wanting to be different, even wanting to be a revolutionary. But it's a sextile. This is a fortunate aspect. People are being unique and different in a favourable way. And you need to appreciate this. And you don't want to be too set in your ways. And what you must, under no circumstances, do is try to force your expectations onto another person. Yes, it's easy to do that, and Scorpios can do that, but you need to allow people to behave differently and even to do something that they've never done before. Okay, provided it's not dangerous or self-destructive, but yeah, allow people to be different, allow them to be revolutionaries, and see if you can actually benefit from the situation. Sagittarius. There's stuff going on in fire signs. Remember, Sagittarius is a fire sign. It's actually quite a fiery day, relatively speaking, because we've got the moon in Leo, we've got Mercury in Leo, we've actually got the moon making a trine to Chiron, and Chiron is in Aries, and of course Sagittarius is a fire sign. So there are things happening, and there are opportunities to find excitement. And I think that with this moon trine Chiron, it does affect your sign directly. Even though there's nothing in Sagittarius, no major planets in Sagittarius, that trine between moon and Chiron has a direct impact on your sign. And I think that with that moon trine Chiron, you are going to want to do something that is different, that perhaps breaks the mold a little. You may actually have be noticing when you look around you that some people are just a little bit staid. They're doing things in the same old way, and it's becoming a bit boring, and you need to shake things up a little. And Sagittarius, I very much think that is something you can do. And also people need energy. Some people just don't have the energy. And maybe Sagittarius, it's down to you to create the action. And one way of creating action is to do something that is a little bit unusual, that is a reflection of your unique personality. And part of that unique personality that perhaps you don't normally show, but you start to show it, and immediately people take notice of it, and it changes the whole dynamic, and it can actually change the way the whole day moves. So you're one of the people who can, in a way, guide the day. You're, I think, more of a leader than a follower, but in a gentle way. It's just by example, showing the world what you can do, showing the world a different way of dealing with things. And you're going to be very gregarious. You're going to have lots to say, and the things you say are going to be interesting and perhaps exciting. And I think that you're going to know what to say. You will have the sensitivity to be able to know how to make an impression. And, this is because Mercury is sextile Jupiter. Jupiter's your ruler. It's in Gemini. And the ruler of Gemini is Mercury. Mercury sextile Jupiter. That's about you being able to really get your message out and be able to come up with something that is really original. And it's not about just focusing on small little details. A lot of people are just focused on small details. They find that easier, but you're allowing people to see things in a broad sense. And, that's Sagittarius. That's what Sagittarius is all about. So in many respects, Sagittarius, it's your kind of day. And I know recently, Sagittarius, you've had a lot of days which have just not been your kind of day, where you felt that you haven't been able to be yourself. You felt that circumstances have limited you, that you've had to be more emotional than you would have liked to have been. But things are changing. And so today, I think there is a considerable amount of optimism. And also, you don't have to spend the day alone. There are plenty of kindred spirits out there, people on your wavelength who you can get on really well with them. You've got something to offer, but at the same time, you are able to react. React is perhaps the wrong word. You're able to maybe just listen. You can give people time. You can allow other people to say what they want to say. So you're not going to be obnoxious today. You're not going to be pushing any particular agenda. You're not going to be egotistical. Even though you're more of a leader than a follower, it's not about ego. And it's not about ego. It's all about making things happen. And if you want to make things happen, you have to understand that different people have their own ways of understanding the world. They have their own reaction times. And you're going to be able to understand that all just intuitively. You'll just get it. So, Sagittarius, you've got a special responsibility today. It's you that can inspire other people, and at the same time, you can make things happen. Capricorn. It's a day, Capricorn, when you may feel that things are going a little bit too quickly, and you might want to slow them down. And I think there is a possibility that you get somewhat annoyed over the day if things don't go to plan. And the reason for any annoyance you might have would be the fact that Saturn, which is your ruler, is square the Sun-Mars midpoint. So the Sun-Mars midpoint is the Sun and Mars as a pair are quite action-orientated. They're quite dynamic. They can be quite dangerous. They can be quite out of control. That's Sun and Mars. But there's Saturn. There's you trying to deal with this. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to stabilize things. And you're trying to create control, create a situation where things aren't going to blow up. So I suppose in some respects, Capricorn, you may feel that you're something of a firefighter. There are metaphorical fires turning up in all sorts of places, and you have somehow got to deal with them. Now, I don't know whether or not that is the right role. I suppose it depends on the situation. Some fires need to be put out. I know all fires need to be put out, but some conflagrations are dangerous and they need to be dealt with straight away. But other times, you're dealing with people who are full of energy, full of action. They want things to happen, particularly with the moon in Leo. It's what people want to do, but you might not appreciate this. And so there's a danger, Capricorn, that you are too harsh in terms of judging other people, responding to people. You don't want to respond immediately to anyone. You need to give yourself some time to actually work out what is happening. And so be a firefighter for sure, but don't put out the human spirit. I mean, that would be a bad thing. But on a sort of more positive note, I think that if you accept that, fundamentally you have your own view of the world, other people have their view of the world, and that your view of the world perhaps needs to be developed, because the moon and Mercury are in Leo. Leo, from a Capricorn view, it's quite a private sign, and it's a sign which allows you to really understand things, get to the bottom of things, to really understand what you should be doing and what is the truth of the matter. And it's not going to be immediately apparent. And you have to also not jump to conclusions about other people. Very easy to do, to jump to conclusions about other people. Make assumptions about who they are and what they want. This is especially the case if you don't know them very well. That I think is a possibility. So you've got to be open-minded and don't get angry unless it's really necessary. Now, one other thing about the Saturn on the Sun-Mars midpoint is that the Saturn on the Sun-Mars midpoint could make you a little bit accident prone. I mean, Sun and Mars are very positive, masculine planets, and so when you bring them together, they can be just too much of a good thing. And so when you put Saturn square the Sun-Mars midpoint, and Saturn is ruler of Capricorn, things could go wrong if you are not careful. So don't be too hasty, and don't do anything that is at all dangerous. So I'm sorry to have so far been so negative, but I suppose I should also point out that the Venus is sextile Uranus. Now that Venus sextile Uranus is probably, Capricorn, what you should be concentrating on. It's a nice aspect, Venus sextile Uranus. Venus is kind of prominent at the moment in your chart because it's in Cancer, which is in your opposite sign. And so with Venus sextile Uranus, there is a possibility that you get some kind of inspiration. It maybe comes from another person. It's not that this person is necessarily themselves inspiring, but something they do has an inspiring nature. At least it inspires you. And so when you get inspired by someone, or to begin with, it might be a challenge because perhaps you don't want to be inspired, but inspiration is there. And you might suddenly recognize that there is actually a new way of doing something that entirely relates to who you are and what your core abilities are. And all of a sudden, it all clicks together. And it happens out of the blue. You simply weren't expecting it. You came into the day with a fairly negative view, and then suddenly everything changes and you realize that a lot of your concerns were completely meaningless, and you start to feel a great sense of purpose. Aquarius. So when I was talking about Capricorn, I mentioned the fact that Saturn was square the Sun-Mars midpoint. Well, Saturn rules Capricorn, and it also rules Aquarius. So you may be impacted by this Saturn square the Sun-Mars midpoint. So this Saturn square the Sun-Mars midpoint does need to be treated with a certain amount of caution. There is a danger that you make a mistake because you're too hasty. And this mistake could be physical, just doing something that's unwise, that's dangerous. That is possible. It could also be financial, because Saturn is moving through Pisces, a very financial section of your chart, and so with Saturn making a square to the Sun-Mars midpoint, you may be in a hurry to make things happen financially, and you may feel that you just want to resolve something and you're just going to be very definite about it, and then in your rush you make a mistake. So from a money point of view, I would be careful here. It's not a good time to be making decisions, particularly if your decision is based on impatience. You just want a resolution. You maybe want to buy something. There are different options, and you can't be bothered to go through the options. You just want to do it. You know how it is. You try and buy something on Amazon, and this has got 4.5 stars, and this has got 5 stars, and why has this got 4 stars? And you go through all of these ratings, and you just get bored of the whole thing, and you just buy something, and then of course later you realize you spent too much money, or you bought something you don't need, or you bought something that doesn't work. So when it comes to making purchases, particularly large purchases, then don't make decisions. And it's probably a bad idea to make decisions in decisions that are at all financial, because I think you're just in too much of a hurry to get a resolution. So in that sense, Aquarius, I think a bit of patience is required. Now, I'm not saying, though, that it's going to be a problem day. It needn't be a problem day at all. And I think that you can benefit from things happening out there. It's not all about you. It's all about people and events which can have an impact on you, which actually can have quite a favourable impact on you if you give them a chance. Now, sometimes Aquarians can be quite stuck in their ways. Aquarius is, of course, a fixed sign, and they feel they don't need any help. They don't need any support, but I think that would be incorrect. I mean, okay, sure, you can get by without help and support, and you can get by without encouragement, but shouldn't you just be taking advantage shouldn't you be taking advantage of everything that's on offer? Because I think quite a lot is on offer. And Mercury is moving through Leo, which is your opposite sign. It's making a very nice sextile aspect to Jupiter. And so this might represent something that is on offer for you to take advantage of. And it's take it or leave it. You could leave it, perhaps because you don't feel it's necessary, but I would take the offer. But when I'm talking about taking an offer, I'm not talking about any offer that requires you to spend money or for you to make commitments. It's a kind of thing where you don't have to give anything away, you don't have to agree to anything, you don't have to sign on a dotted line. It's just something that is freely available. And if you take it, I'm fairly confident that you can benefit from it. Pisces, you are relatively sociable today, in the sense that people are going to gravitate towards you, and I think you can respond in a fairly nice way. But at the same time, you probably feel that there are other things to do. And I think that Pisceans right now are aware of the obligations being placed upon them. I mean, I'm not talking about serious obligations, but you do understand that there are things that need to be done, though you don't want to you don't want to take on too much. I think there is a danger that Pisces, you do try to do too much today. you try to do lots of little things. They all mount up. You feel you do that, you do this, you do that, and it could just get to be too much. And that is because of a square aspect between the Moon and Mars. That Moon-Mars square could just encourage you to just be moving around all day, going from place to place, even if you're in one place, even if perhaps you're just making lots of phone calls, or just constant activity. And this activity, once you start it, it doesn't stop. And you could end up getting exhausted and at the same time irritated. So make sure that you don't push yourself too hard, and try to create some boundaries, I think. Yes, there may be pressures from the outside world to do things, and it's easy to, just give in to these pressures. But then you'll lose all your time. Everything will go, and you won't be able to take advantage of all the good things going on today. And I do think that there are good things happening today. I just mentioned at the beginning of this piece on Pisces that your social skills are actually quite good. And I think that people are going to like you. And we do have a sextile aspect between Mercury and Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is your ruler. Jupiter rules Pisces. It's not Neptune, by the way. I mean, some people think Neptune rules Pisces. It doesn't. Jupiter rules Pisces. And Mercury is making an exact sextile to Jupiter, and so this allows you to really have a good connection with the world out there, and in your own way you can organize it, but in a way that shouldn't be about big responsibility. When one hears about organization, one thinks, oh, you've got a big responsibility to sort other people out, to sort things out. But that's not what you want to do. The pressure should not be on you to create stability. That's not what you have to do. You perhaps have to decide what's important, and perhaps you need to decide which people are important. Some people matter, but you can't be in a situation where everyone matters, because again, then you have no time for yourself. You're not able to distinguish what's important, and it all turns into a big mess. So with that Mercury sextile Jupiter, Pisces, you just need to identify who matters today, and make sure you give these people enough time, but of course not too much time. Now, that Mercury sextile Jupiter, from the perspective of close one-to-one relationships, is fortunate. It's a classic. I think astrologers looking at the 12 signs, they always get excited about an aspect like Mercury sextile Jupiter when talking about the signs involved. That would be, Jupiter rules Pisces and Sagittarius. Mercury rules Gemini and Virgo. So, astrologers, 12-sign astrologers, are always going to say that aspect is going to be really good for the romantic prospects of Gemini, Pisces, Sagittarius, and Virgo. So that's sort of standard 12-sign astrology, to look at an aspect like Mercury sextile Jupiter and say, well, that's going to be good for close relationships, it's going to be good for romance, good for love. So take it or leave it. I think that all things being equal, Mercury sextile Jupiter should be good for relationships, close relationships. If relevant, could be good for romance. So it really does help. And it also is going to just be good for the way your brain works. Mercury is sextile your Jupiter. Mercury represents the mind. It represents ideas. And so Pisces, do take advantage of it. Your brain is on good form, and you can come up with some really useful ideas. So don't just let them go. Make sure that you take these ideas seriously, because very soon they could become important. And that's it for my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I'm now going to transition to the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was number 25, which is innocence. So the general principle of this hexagram, innocence, is that we mustn't have expectations. I mean, that makes sense. Expectations can be so damaging. If we expect something to happen, then it just doesn't happen. It's like the expectations kill it. And we just have to be completely open to any possibility. And I think that is kind of reflected in what I was saying with the astrology, like with Venus sextile Uranus. There's a possibility of something happening unexpectedly. We don't think it's going to happen, but it just happens out of the blue, and then we can take advantage of it. So that's the broad principle of this hexagram. But we do have some moving lines, and these moving lines are not great. The third line from the bottom moves. And this is a warning. And what the I Ching says is that we have a cow, and we tie this house up. We tie this cow up, and someone steals it. We lose our cow. We lose our property. And the I Ching says it's not our fault. We didn't deserve this to happen. We just lose something. And so at a very basic level, we talk about innocence, something unexpected happening. But this unexpected thing happening might be a negative. So we have to be very careful today about losing things. It may just be very simple. So if you are out, with your keys, your money, your wallet, whatever, your purse, whatever, your phone, it can get lost. It can get stolen even. So really look out for ways in which you are vulnerable to theft. Obviously, don't leave your cow. If you have a cow, don't leave it in the street tied up, assuming that no one's going to steal it, because they might steal it. But whatever it is, wherever you think you might be vulnerable to theft, then today be extra careful. It needn't happen. I'm not saying it can't happen, but do what you can to protect yourself from theft. But the I Ching goes further than this and says something really bizarre and somewhat disturbing and counterintuitive. It says that if we prepare for the future, for example, we save money up for the future, we do the sensible thing, isn't it? I mean, that's what we're supposed to do, isn't it? We're supposed to build up resources to protect ourselves from future disaster. It says if we do that, we get the opposite. So attempts to prepare for the future could actually just be a waste of time. Now, remember, this is a reading for today. It's not about what you're doing, what you should be doing over the next few years or decades. I mean, in general, of course, it's a good idea to prepare for the future. But things we do today to help safeguard ourselves, in a financial sense in particular, may not work out. And so perhaps, when we're putting money aside, or we think we're spending money to safeguard ourselves, that action of spending money may turn out to be a complete waste of time. So remember, that is just for today. And the top hexagram moves as the top line moves as well. And again, top line in an I Ching is often not particularly fortunate. And so with that top line moving, it's an indication that really we shouldn't do anything. It's not a day when we should really be looking for things to happen. Yeah, sure, we might hope for things to happen, but it doesn't seem as if they will happen, and we shouldn't be taking action. So the I Ching in the first instance is really cautious here. It's suggesting that things are just not going to work to plan. But this hexagram innocence does change, and it changes to hexagram 49, which is revolution. And perhaps what was going on with innocence was an indication that there may have been just something wrong with the way we were dealing with our lives, and perhaps dealing with certain financial aspects of our lives, maybe certain security aspects of our life. And revolution requires a change. Things have to be altered. We can't be satisfied with the status quo. And we need to consider our security in a completely new way. We need to revolutionize our ideas about our security, perhaps long-term savings. Remember this video, I do not give financial advice. Financial advice is not about financial advice. It's just for entertainment purposes only. But we just need a completely different approach. And with a revolution, it often means that the hierarchy needs to be changed. People who you thought knew best, people who you thought could be trusted, maybe are not trustworthy. Maybe they need to be overthrown. Maybe you need to actually reconsider how you are looking after your own security and how you are looking after your future. So when you consider the future and how you are protecting yourself from maybe negative events, whether they're today or in 10 years' time, you perhaps need a change of approach, and perhaps it's quite a revolutionary change of approach. And that's it with the I Ching. Sorry, it's not more positive, but I think it's kind of giving some advice. So do consider it. Where could you be more secure? How are you not safeguarding security? And what actual actions could you be taking? So I now want to go back to the issue of American politics. I do understand that for some of you it might be quite a boring subject, and I'm not talking about anything I haven't gone through before. So I want to start by looking at the Biden administration, because the Biden administration does seem to be in a bit of trouble at the moment in terms of people questioning Biden's fitness to be president. And this is why people are starting to focus on alternatives, for example, Kamala Harris. So Biden became president on January the 20th, 2021. And so here is the chart for his inauguration. This is the legal inauguration. I mean, I know you had the oath of office and so on, and that takes place at a sort of different time, but this is the moment when Biden became president. And I always thought that this inauguration chart was bad from the perspective of world peace, because I didn't like the fact that this Mars conjunct Uranus here, square Jupiter, square Saturn, kind of square the Sun. It seemed to me to be a difficult chart. But of course, it's not just about world peace. It's just about the Biden administration, I suppose in general, it's not going to work well in the end. It seemed to be that astrologically he was not in the end going to be a successful president. Of course, I understand that his supporters claim that his presidency is great, the economy is going well, etc., etc. But there is an alternative narrative, and of course, the United States is involved in conflict in several parts of the world, and this situation in Ukraine with its proxy war against Russia is getting quite scary, and the United States just doesn't know when to stop, doesn't know what it's taking on. But it does seem that this chart can just be seen in terms of an administration in trouble. So the question is, why is it why is it in trouble right now? And I thought it would be a good idea to look at the solar arc directions of this chart. And so if you look at this chart by eye, without doing any calculations, you see that there's a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction at the time of the inauguration. Actually quite a good time in a way to start a new regime just after the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. New beginning, new Jupiter-Saturn cycle. That looks great. And we notice that Jupiter and Saturn are about 3.5 degrees apart. And from a symbolic point of view, we could then say that actually we might anticipate problems after about 3.5 years. So if we look at the solar arc directions for the inauguration, and let's just put them side by side. So if we remember 1 degree equals 1 year. So there's Saturn at 3 degrees 56 Aquarius. So by solar arc direction, it's moved to 7 degrees 27 Aquarius as of July the 6th. So about the time he's having this big crisis in the wake of the CNN debate. And so we can see that Saturn has directed to 7 degrees 27 Aquarius. And of course, Jupiter is at 723 Aquarius. So really, that's exact. So at the time of the debate, and now Saturn is hitting Jupiter. Jupiter, you could say, is the expansive force of a presidency, and it's an important planet, Jupiter. So Saturn conjunct Jupiter is not particularly fortunate. Also, there's something else going on, and if you look at his moon and his, we can look at the directions here. So you can see that the moon is now started. The moon is at 29 degrees 3 Aries, right at the end of Aries at the time he was inaugurated. I mean, that's not a great time for. It's not really a great time to be inaugurated, but you can see that the directed moon has now moved to about 2 degrees 34 Taurus. And so the directed moon is now within less than a degree of Saturn. In the end, that moon is starting to make the square to Saturn in the inauguration chart. So it does seem that the inauguration chart, in terms of solar arc directions, is indicating a few problems. And I suppose as time goes on, this moon is getting ever closer to that square of Saturn. So it's now within It's now, I suppose it's 1.5 degrees apart, which might be a year and a half, but still, it's that sense. But with the Biden presidency, is just under pressure, pressure, pressure. Even if he were to get re-elected, then that inauguration is an important time because there is. I know there's a second inauguration, or is there? I don't know what happens, but it's a new. I don't know quite how it works. But there's a new term, but I think that if he continues as president, that Moon will move into his second term because that's when he became president, and so next year after, then the Moon is going to be really it's going to be hitting his Saturn. But are we going to get to being a year after? I don't know. Another thing about the inauguration chart, and of course the most dramatic thing about the inauguration chart, is the Mars-Uranus conjunction. And this Mars-Uranus conjunction is just so close. It's 4 minutes apart. And to my mind, that Mars-Uranus conjunction is just about war. But it's about conflict. And we know that on July the 15th, that's just over a week's time, there is another Mars-Uranus conjunction. So the inauguration chart, because Mars-Uranus conjunction is so close, it means it's just going to chime to the Mars-Uranus conjunction. It's just a very much part of this presidency, and it's going to really be hit by the Mars-Uranus cycle. So when the Mars-Uranus conjunction comes around again in a week's time, I think that's going to hit the presidency in a big way. I mean, it's going to hit a lot of people in a big way. It's going to hit Trump in a big way, actually. It's going to hit Biden. This Mars-Uranus conjunction is square Trump's Mars. It's not just about Biden and the Biden administration, but we can see how this Mars-Uranus conjunction in a week's time is going to have a big impact. Then we have Biden's solar return for 2023. So this chart is still operational. And the thing I found incredible about this solar return set for November the 19th, 2023, is the moon. The moon is exactly on the descendant. So I thought that the moon on the descendant represents, I suppose, perhaps his enemies. Could Red say something about going back to the war, the proxy war that America is having with Russia? And so that's the moon right on the descendant. But it's also the fact that the moon is relatively close to Saturn. So you can see that the moon is about 7 degrees away. It's pretty much exactly 7 degrees from Saturn. And so, as this is a solar return, we might want to see this in a symbolic sense. So 7 degrees could be 7 months. So if we count 7 months, so that's November. So November, that would be December, January, February, March, April, May, June. So in theory, that Moon-Saturn conjunction would hit around June the 19th, 2023. And of course, the debate was pretty close pretty close to that. It was just a week or two afterwards, after the exact moment. So when you're looking at solar return in general, do look at aspects that are about to happen and then use a symbolic measure, because I think this works pretty well. But overall, I think it's a very difficult solar return, and I think that with Moon conjunct Saturn, we can see it being a difficult year, and I think we do get a sense of timing. So do use symbolic measures. 1 degree equals 1 year with solar returns. Try it. Sorry, let me say it again. 1 degree equals 1 month. Often works with solar returns because solar returns just represent 1 year. They've got a limited lifespan. And when you're talking about Joe Biden, just remember that probably the big operational transit he has at the moment is Saturn on his descendant. It's Saturn went stationary very close, sorry, not descendant, I mean the IC. At the bottom of the chart, it's got Saturn on his IC, and that really does seem to be having a really difficult impact on him. So let's now consider Kamala Harris. And with Kamala Harris, I do think it's easy to underestimate her and to consider, what is good about her chart. There are some good things about her chart. She's got North Node rising. The North Node can just be regarded as a fortunate point. It can be of the nature of Jupiter, at least looking at it in terms of, for example, the astrology of William Lilly in the 17th century. It's of the nature of Jupiter. The North Node works well in a Gemini. It's a sort of sign of, I don't know, rulership or exaltation, but I mean, it's a sign where it works. And this is the same as in Vedic astrology. And in Vedic astrology, her North Node is in Gemini as well. So she's got North Node in Gemini, both zodiacs. So it's a good North Node. She's got it rising. And I think that does make her potentially strong. This is someone who potentially can defeat her enemies. It's also telling us about how this woman needs to function to be successful. She needs to be thinking of herself. She needs to act in terms of herself and what is important. She shouldn't worry too much about other people. And I suppose this links with the fact that she's got a full moon. She's got the moon in Aries, exactly opposition the sun in Libra. Oh, and by the way, notice her Saturn. Saturn's pretty close to the midheaven, and Saturn's in Aquarius. Saturn's well placed in Aquarius. It's in its own sign. Okay, it is a nighttime chart, so that means that Saturn is not working as well as it should do because it's a nighttime chart, because it's above the horizon. But it's a masculine planet in a masculine sign, and it is close to the plateaus, to the midheaven. So I think that does help. But this full moon, I think this full moon is really important for Kamala Harris to understand what this full moon is about. Because the full moon is exact, pretty much. And so she must feel this incredible tension between moon in Aries and moon in Libra. And I think this may be her big problem. I understand that her political life started with the help of someone else. I don't want to go into the details there or speculate about it, but someone helped her start her political career. And so, being Sun in Libra, she's always aware of other people, and she's got to please other people, hasn't she? She's got to make everyone happy in order to be successful in her political career. But in a female chart, the Sun in Libra is something, the Sun in general is something that should be grown out of in terms of the most important of the two lights. The moon is a female planet. She needs to grow into her moon. It's like with Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher had the sun in Libra, but she had the moon in Leo. And so, in fact, Margaret Thatcher, when she was just a cabinet minister in Edward Heath's cabinet, she didn't actually say much, apparently, in cabinet meetings, at least to begin with. She wasn't a very assertive person, although she did remove free milk from children, so she got her reputation as Thatcher the milk snatcher, and that was how she was. That was the first piece of major attention that Margaret Thatcher got. But it took Margaret Thatcher a bit of time to grow into her moon in Leo, and by the time she was prime minister, she was pretty towards the end of her reign as prime minister, she was very much Leo. when she said she was outside Downing Street, and she said something. She used the royal we. I think she said, "We are a grandmother," to announce the birth of it. She was when one of her children had had a child. Using the royal we. That's a very Leo thing to do. And with Kamala Harris, she absolutely needs to get into this moon. She needs to look at the Margaret Thatcher model. She has to move away from that sun. And I think part of a problem that Kamala Harris has had is that she's been, as vice president, she's been trying too hard to please. She's the vice president. She's not the president. She's always having to work out what to do, and with under Joe Biden, keep Joe Biden happy, keep the administration happy, keep various interest groups happy, and I'm sure there are loads of interest groups, progressive interest groups or whatever. She has to keep them all happy. She's trying to keep them all happy, and in the process, she's destroying herself. And so that's the problem. And if she can get into her moon, I think that she can be a successful politician, and we should not write her off. And I understand I'm being slightly contrarian here. I'm not saying, by the way, she's going to become president, but just do not write her off. Once she gets into that moon, I think she can be a very powerful force. Now, that sun moon opposition, it's also tied in with Uranus, and you can see that she's got Uranus semi-square the sun, and she's got Uranus sesquiquadrate the moon. So with Kamala Harris, things always happen, don't they? And maybe that's also reflected in the way she communicates. She's always, talked about this inappropriate chuckling and laughter, and people like to criticize her. Maybe that's Uranus, but perhaps she needs to tune into that Uranus. That Uranus is in the fourth house. It's all about, I suppose, creating surprises, and that's what Uranus has to do. She has to surprise people, and I suppose maybe this is what's happening right now. She's getting the progressive media is being really positive about her, saying how accomplished she is, how she's communicating. Well, you don't have to believe it. I'm just telling you what the progressive media had. I was just reading a Guardian article about her, saying, was very complimentary about her and how she was getting it together. I think she made some speech somewhere. Was it in New Orleans or somewhere down south, I think. But yeah, she is being really talked up right now. But that is her chart, and I just don't think that she should be underestimated. And I will be looking at her Vedic chart in a moment. Now, as in looking at how she occurs to the United States, I think that's really important, how she occurs to the United States, because she's, I assume, planning to be US president. I mean, that's her plan. So what do the Americans think of her? So if we take the July 4th, 1776 chart, we can put Kamala Harris's chart on the outside to see how Americans are relating to this woman. And the thing that really strikes me is her Saturn. Now, one thing I didn't point out is that Kamala Harris has a Sun trine Saturn aspect in her chart. That Sun trine Saturn is really good, I would have said. Saturn's in Aquarius in its own sign. Sun is in Libra, in the sign of Saturn's exaltation. This is a very disciplined, focused person. She might not seem like it, but she is hardworking, and she has a clear sense about what she wants. And the question is, how does it relate to the American people? Now, American chart, July the 4th, 1776, the moon in that chart, assuming 5:10 p.m., is at 27 Aquarius. So in other words, Kamala Harris's Saturn is exactly conjunct the United States' moon. And the moon represents the American people. And so her Saturn is hitting the American people. So you might say that that is a problem, because some Americans might regard her as actually being a bit of a control freak, trying to tell them what to do. I mean, I suppose that's what progressives do. Some Americans are going to respond badly to her. And it doesn't help the fact that her Mars, she's actually born with a wide Mars-Saturn opposition. And so Kamala's Mars is opposition the moon, which is the American people. So the American people can pick up the fact that Kamala Harris has got a Mars-Saturn opposition. And that Mars-Saturn opposition is being projected onto the American people. Are the American people really going to go for that? Well, possibly not. On the other hand, her sun is trine the moon. So maybe there's a right way for her to present herself. Maybe she needs to work on this. That Sun trine Saturn, maybe it's not. Maybe the Saturn hitting the America's moon is not. She's not destined to cause a bad reaction. If she can bring in that Sun as well, it needs to be moderated. But I don't know. It's probably the case that Saturn on the moon is not great, and it's possibly going to lose her votes. And also that her Mars opposition the moon, it doesn't help. I'm not saying though that that's a deal breaker. Maybe she can find a way of using that Sun trine Saturn. And don't forget her moon. If we want to be positive about it, she's got her moon at 27 Aries. So her moon is sextile the United States' moon. So it's certainly not surprising how she's doing so well in American politics. So I don't know, Kamala Harris, and if she has an astrologer, she has to work this through with her astrologer. She has to perhaps work out how she can use, I'm sure she doesn't have an astrologer, but if she were to have an astrologer, she needs to work out how this moon, to her full moon, kind of being hit by Mars, is how she can change her style to make sure that she causes minimal offence amongst the American people, and allows herself to get elected. I don't think it's hopeless. I think actually Kamala's chart is an example of how perhaps an astrologer could have really helped her, because I think her problems politically in terms of presentation and what she's doing, they are shown so well in her chart, and I think it's also shown so clearly what she should have been doing. Now, looking at her solar return, when I say solar return, this is her solar return just before the elections. So here's her 2024 solar return. It's a mixed bag, isn't it? Solar return, she's got Venus rising. That's nice. But at the same time, she has got Saturn. She's got Saturn on her IC. So Saturn's exactly on her IC in her solar return, which was on October 20th, 2024, just a couple of weeks before the election. I'm not convinced that is positive, but I do like the Venus rising. That Venus rising may indicate success, perhaps. Could be useful. But then we have to consider her transits for the day of the presidential election. And so as far as the presidential elections 2020. So we've got Kamala's chart in the middle, and on the outer wheel we've got the positions of the planets on November the 5th, 2024. And there is a problem here, and in terms of transit, so we've got there's a Sun-Moon opposition, and we find that Saturn is causing problems. So Saturn, on a day of election, the election is 12 degrees 46 Pisces. So it's just about to go stationary. And so it is exactly 45 degrees from her moon. And Saturn is exactly 135 degrees from her sun. So, and it's opposition her Mercury. So Saturn is hitting the most important configuration in her chart by opposition, semi-square and sesquiquadrate. It's absolutely devastating. Now you could say, but Saturn could bring responsibility. The responsibility perhaps of being elected president or even re-elected vice president. That is a possibility. But my feeling here is to regard it as more of a negative than a positive. That's what I kind of think. So that doesn't seem great. And I now want to just quickly look at her Vedic chart. And turning to her Vedic chart. So here's her Vedic chart. And looking at the Vedic chart, there's her North Node on the ascendant. There's the ascendant at the beginning of Gemini. Rahu is a North Node, and it's you probably can't see this, but her Rahu Dasha started in July 2012, and it continues until 2030. So during those 18 years, her Rahu is really prominent. And of course, since 2012, she has had continued electoral success. I think she was elected to the Senate and then becoming vice president. So things have really been moving for her politically since 2012. So we see evidence that Rahu is working. Now, in 2023, January 2023, I think you can just about see this. She moved into the Rahu, in her Rahu major period, but she moved into the Ketu sub-period. And so this was a really difficult time for her. And so that would have lasted from January 2023 to February 2024. And since February 2024, I believe that things have improved. She's moved into her Rahu's major period, Venus sub-period. And Venus does rule her 5th house, which is very fortunate. It also rules her 12th house. So there's a question of how well Venus is going to work, but it's certainly working better from Rahu major period, from the Ketu sub-period. So I think we're seeing evidence here that Kamala Harris, the situation is improving for her. But is she, what's going to happen now? So I took a bit of a gamble here, and I always hate doing these kind of things, but I did ask a horary question, and the horary question I asked was this. I asked, on February the 1st, 2025, will Kamala Harris be either president or vice president? So it's a question that's a little bit vague. So I'm not, it doesn't mean it doesn't tell us much, perhaps. It's not saying whether or not Biden is going to be president, although we can make some assumptions there. But it says, is she going to be president or vice president on February the 1st, 2025? Now, the reason I've gone for February the 1st is just because it's after the election, it's after whatever inauguration there might be. It's a new administration. Will she be president or vice president? So this is the horary chart I got. The ascendant might be a half a degree out, because I think this program actually has the incorrect coordinates for Lakewood, Washington, but it's not out by much. So I'm using a Regiomontanus house cusp here, by the way, because tradition. I use kind of William Lilly's system up to a point in horary chart. So this is the question I ask. So I am the ascendant. I'm the person asking the question. That makes me Taurus. I've got Taurus rising. I've got Mars in Taurus. I'm the question. That's part of who I am. I'm the questioner. So who is Kamala? Well, you could say she's vice president. So we could take her as ruler of the 10th. And you might say that she's Saturn in Pisces. On the other hand, Kamala Harris is someone I don't know. She's just a person I'm asking about. And so you could say that Kamala Harris is actually the 7th house cusp. And I would kind of take her as the 7th house cusp and a ruler. We've got Libra on the 7th. We've got South Node on the 7th. It's interesting that Kamala Harris has North Node on rising in her chart. And this chart also has North Node rising. But you have to remember, I'm asking the question. So Kamala Harris is not the ascendant. And I do not regard myself as a partisan of Kamala Harris. Maybe if I was a fanatical Kamala Harris supporter, I was a fanatical Democrat, maybe you could take the ascendant. I'm, as you know from my videos, I'm neutral. If I do not have a vote in this country, if I had the vote, I would not know who to vote for. So I'm not a partisan. I don't think we can take Kamala Harris as the ascendant. I think we have to take her as the descendant. And so we would take Kamala Harris as Venus. Now, is Venus in, what kind of position is Venus in? You can see that Venus is actually moving away from combustion. And I think that actually describes Kamala Harris quite well. I think she's moving out of Biden's shadows. I think things are getting better for her. No doubt at all about that. And I think that really describes it. I think she's actually tuning into her moon in Libra. So do not write her off. But is this chart good enough to make her president or vice president by January the 1st, 2020? By February the 1st, 2025. And the issue here is that, is Venus peregrine? Does Venus actually have any dignity in Cancer? And this depends what table of essential dignities you use. So if you use Ptolemy's essential dignities, Venus has terms in Cancer. On the other hand, if you use the essential dignities of, say, Al-Biruni, Hellenistic astrology has become very popular recently, and there is a view that the terms used by William Lilly were basically, he got something wrong, and likewise with Ptolemy, that really there wasn't much of a basis for Ptolemy's terms. And if you use the Egyptian terms, then you would say that Venus is not in term. Venus is peregrine. And in my own work with astrology, I used to use the Chaldean terms, but I really use Egyptian terms now. And so she is peregrine. She has no dignity, I would say, I would argue. And is this chart good enough to make her vice president or president by February the 1st, 2025? And yeah, the moon is making a conjunction to Mercury, but it's not a very strong moon. The moon does not have any dignity in Leo. It's not connected. Well, it's perhaps making making a trine to the ascendant, but the ascendant is her opponent, I would argue. So on the basis of this chart, I would say that on February the 1st, 2025, Kamala Harris will neither be president nor vice president on the basis of this chart. Now, I will be looking more at this chart, and maybe I'll reconsider it, but my immediate reaction to this chart is to say no. I know things are getting better for her, for sure, but it just may be too little too late. And that I think is perhaps my answer with Kamala Harris. Of course, I'm not saying she can't be president in the short term. For example, if Joe Biden were to resign, then yeah, she could take over from him, but she won't last very long as president in that case, because, you know, she is not going to be president after, or vice president after February the 1st, 2025, either because the Democrats find a different nominee for November, or because Trump beats her. Anyway, I will reconsider this chart, but that's my view at the moment. Maybe I won't reconsider the chart. Maybe the chart has actually said it. I just find it very difficult to see anything positive about the chart. Or rather, it's not a terrible chart, but it's not good enough. That's what I would say. So yeah, I think it's too little too late with Kamala Harris. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for today. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you enjoyed this video, I would of course be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.